How could a .38 caliber bullet fail to stop a point-blank attacker? The answer lay in the pain tolerance of Moro warriors. The disastrous failure of this caliber in the Philippines in 1899 launched a chain of decisions. Decisions that would eventually determine the fate of American troops in the Pacific jungles of World War II. During the Philippine-American War, U.S. soldiers faced an impossible reality. Enemies absorbed multiple gunshot wounds and kept moving forward. An American soldier raised his .38 long Colt. He fired directly into the charging attacker. The loud crack of the gunshot echoed through the vegetation. It did nothing. The Moro warrior did not stop, swinging his heavy kris sword. These fighters bound their limbs with leather to restrict blood flow. They conditioned their bodies for extreme trauma. The Moro waged a guerrilla war across an archipelago of 7,000 islands. Every close-quarters ambush became a desperate fight for survival. The standard-issue sidearm offered no salvation. The .38 long Colt fired a 9.7-gram bullet. It traveled at 234 meters per second. Those numbers meant nothing against a man prepared to die. The lightweight projectile lacked the energy to drop a human target. Panic spread among the ranks. They needed a heavier impact. The military command required a pragmatic solution. General Leonard Wood compiled the after-action reports in 1904. He bypassed standard procurement protocols. Wood ordered his officers to open the crates and distribute retired .45 caliber revolvers back to the frontline troops. 253 meters per second. General Wood's reports forced the military to seek a radical solution on domestic testing grounds. Chicago slaughterhouses processed millions of livestock annually, but scientists repurposed these facilities for the grim science of lethality. Colonel John Thompson and Major Louis Lagarde established a commission in 1904. They sought the precise physics required to drop an attacker. Scientists suspended dead cattle from heavy ropes and fired rounds directly into the hanging meat. The heavy impact of lead striking thick flesh echoed loudly. Researchers measured the pendulum displacement of the swinging carcasses to calculate kinetic energy transfer. The commission observed the gruesome results to find a formula for immediate incapacitation. They evaluated various velocities, dismissing smaller munitions that passed through tissue without transferring shock. The verdict emerged from the testing floors with stark clarity. No military cartridge smaller than .45 caliber possessed the traumatic force necessary to halt a determined human target. This macabre scientific pursuit birthed the .45 ACP cartridge, carrying a 14.9-gram full metal jacket bullet. The engineering prioritized a massive energy dump upon impact over aerodynamic speed. John Browning designed his new automatic weapon ammunition entirely around this singular ballistic principle. Why did Japanese infantry fear a 40-year-old pistol more than artillery? Because it killed definitively. 40 years after John Browning's tests, this cartridge faced its ultimate trial on the Pacific Islands. Night falls. The perimeter breaks. Pitch-black darkness conceals everything. A Marine fires his rifle. The bolt locks back. Empty. Chaotic screams erupt nearby. A Banzai charge surges forward. Footsteps slam the wet earth. Shadows rush in. The soldier drops the empty rifle, abandoning the primary weapon that the generals back in Washington considered his sole means of survival. His hand snaps to his hip. He draws the pistol. The heavy slide racks. The safety clicks. He fires. A charging silhouette drops instantly. No hesitation. No secondary movements. The threat vanishes. The 1944 United States Army doctrine misread reality. The manual classified handguns as secondary weapons, a mandatory backup, a piece of steel carried for regulatory compliance. But the realities of jungle combat exposed this desk theory. To the brass, the pistol was an afterthought. To the men in the dirt, it was their primary chance at life. Artillery strikes were distant. Mortars required coordinates. The .45 caliber was personal. It solved problems at the edge of a foxhole. 7 different Pacific islands, from Guadalcanal to Pelelu, witnessed the same pattern. The cartridge hit with final authority. The heavy bullet transferred all its momentum into the target. The enemy went down. The enemy stayed down. The official doctrine writers never grasped the desperation of those nights. But the men pulling the triggers knew the truth. In the aftermath of those close-quarter engagements, survival required immediate certainty. In reports, they wrote one word: stopped. The weapon fired perfectly from a dry leather holster, but it became a deadly trap in the Guadalcanal mud. For 3 decades, the M1911A1 remained the standard American sidearm. It saw combat in the trenches of France. It crossed continents. The military establishment considered the matter settled. Unloaded, the pistol weighed 1.1 kilograms of solid steel. With a full magazine inserted, the weight increased even further. The design prioritized rugged durability over ease of handling. Then came the Pacific Campaign. The dense jungle terrain rewrote the rules of engagement entirely. Night attacks dominated Japanese infantry tactics throughout 1942 and 1943. Marines fought blindly on New Georgia. They bled in the swamps of Bougainville. Combat happened at point-blank range in total darkness. The M1911A1 suddenly revealed its severe ergonomic flaws. Marines gripped the steel tightly. Slippery, cold mud from the banks of the Lunga River coated the pistol's grip entirely. The metal felt heavy. Fingers grew numb. In the pitch-black jungle, a soldier needed to shoot in the first half-second of contact. A delay meant a bayonet thrust to the chest. The pistol demanded a perfect grasp to depress the backstrap safety. It required a hard thumb sweep to disengage the frame lock. It needed a heavy trigger pull. 3 conscious actions in a fraction of a second. The extreme stress of a sudden ambush allowed no time for this deliberate sequence. The heavy frame slipped in wet, shaking hands. A slightly poor grip meant a locked trigger. A Marine could easily die holding a fully loaded gun. The mechanism itself never failed. Mechanics logs from Guadalcanal confirmed 0 mechanical breakdowns. Did 7 bullets suffice to repel a night assault? The 1st Marine Division learned the bitter truth. They did not. Even clearing the safeties was not enough. A Marine hit the weapon's hardest limit, magazine capacity. The slide locked back, empty chamber, click. Japanese infantry tactics relied on mass, noise, and speed. None came alone. They charged in waves. Guadalcanal proved this deadly fact in October 1942. The 1st Marine Division lost hundreds of men there. Ammunition simply vanished in seconds during these midnight brawls. The pistol belonged to an older era. Designers built it to merely support a rifle. But in the Pacific, Marines held nothing else. Old doctrine met a new war. Outdated Army thinking left trapped Marines facing massive Japanese infantry charges in the jungle, fighting with just 7 rounds against the dark. What did generals miss pushing new rifles onto troops in 1943? Mass night assaults. Command forced the M1 carbine onto infantry, ignoring the real Pacific threat. Night fell on the foxholes. Then came the noise. The stampede of boots and screams of men sprinting from the blackness. They threw their bodies onto the perimeters. This hit Attu in May 1943, Tarawa in November 1943, Saipan in June 1944, where 4,000 soldiers launched one final assault. Heavy machine guns shredded these waves at a distance, but distance vanished fast. The perimeter broke. Enemy infantry spilled directly into the trenches. They flooded the command posts. Long-range ballistics meant 0 at arm's length. The weapon that kept a soldier alive was the one he drew fast. In the dark, only reflexes worked. A weapon designed specifically for jungle warfare proved deadly for the American riflemen fighting in those very jungles. To halt the nighttime assaults, desk analysts in 1942 proposed their technological solution, the lightweight M1 carbine. On paper, it stood as the ideal intermediate weapon for the Pacific theater. In practice, this caliber killed at a distance, failing completely to stop a target at point-blank range. The rifle fired a lightweight bullet weighing exactly 7.1 grams. Leaving the barrel at 606 meters per second, the projectile maintained high velocity and flew straight. But that high speed became a fatal flaw against a charging fanatic. An exhausted Marine squeezes the trigger, watching the round punch cleanly through an attacking Japanese soldier. The attacker does not fall, continuing his desperate sprint forward with a fixed bayonet. A dull metallic click echoes as the defender frantically jams a fresh 15-round magazine into the receiver. Following the war, SLA Marshall conducted a detailed investigation encompassing hundreds of infantry companies. His data proved that complaints regarding the weapon's lack of stopping power were consistent across the front line. The lightweight bullet simply pierced through human tissue without slowing the momentum of the attacker's charge. How did command react to mass complaints from surviving infantrymen? They blamed soldiers. Generals changed rules. Reports reached headquarters. Planners offered paper solutions. Bougainville, 1943. 30 Marines held a jungle perimeter. They shared 2 or 3 M1911A1 pistols per platoon. Men died waiting. Heavy wooden crates packed with M1 Garand rifle ammunition filled the transport ships. They left no space for pistol calibers. Logistics classified the 45 ACP as a secondary munition. Supply chains treated it accordingly. This strict logistics hierarchy prioritized rifle rounds. It doomed troops in close combat. The distance from Washington offices, where doctrines were rewritten, to the mud-soaked trenches on Bougainville spanned over 12,000 kilometers. Distance bred ignorance. Pacific commanders begged for handguns. Their requests hit a bureaucratic wall. Command ignored the reality of night assaults. Instead of sending weapons, Washington officers simply rewrote the manuals on shooting distances. What occurred on Saipan when Japanese troops jumped directly into American trenches? A single heavy pistol shot decided the battle's outcome. The true price of Washington's paper priorities and logistical mistakes was paid on July 7, 1944. The island of Saipan covers just over 100 square kilometers. The conflict narrowed to a few muddy yards. The assault started in the pre-dawn gloom. 4,000 Japanese infantrymen simultaneously struck the positions of a single division. Artillery batteries attempted to break the incoming wave. Blinding flashes of explosive shells detonated dangerously close to the American trenches. White light repeatedly illuminated the screaming attackers. Then the heavy guns stopped. The enemy was too close. The perimeter collapsed. Men fought in the dark. Rifle ammunition ran dry. Infantrymen threw their empty weapons directly into the mud. They drew their M1911A1 pistols. They fired point-blank into the advancing shadows. The 27th Infantry Division lost hundreds of men killed and wounded in just a few hours of this pre-dawn assault. The clash became a knife fight. Attackers charging into the foxholes met a heavy lead bullet. It weighed exactly 14.9 grams. The large diameter projectile hit the torso and immediately dumped its kinetic energy. The impact dropped men into the dirt. The attackers stopped immediately. This was not a ballistic theory discussed in a distant office. This was the physical reality reported by the soldiers who held the line. Japanese officers who survived the Pacific Campaign later described this specific American handgun. They faced it in the worst possible conditions. Hand-to-hand combat stripped away all tactical advantages. Only raw stopping power mattered. The heavy caliber performed exactly as it had against insurgents decades earlier. The conclusions of 40 years ago saved the infantry of the 27th Division. Why did the United States military attempt to discard the caliber of previous victories in 1985? The answer lay in 15 rounds inside the Beretta M9 magazine and NATO ammunition standardization. Bureaucrats decided that 9mm capacity outweighed the stopping power of heavier bullets. They believed doubling the shot count from 7 rounds would solve any modern tactical problem. However, the veterans of Saipan carried their unshakable belief in the .45 caliber through decades. This explains why elite units refused to surrender their heavy sidearms to warehouses during the transition. The flaw in this administrative logic surfaced during the infamous FBI Miami shootout of 1986. 8 federal agents cornered 2 armed bank robbers, expecting sheer numbers to end the confrontation. Instead, 9mm bullets could not neutralize the desperate attackers fast enough to prevent a catastrophe. The federal agents died at the hands of suspects who continued firing after sustaining multiple gunshot wounds. High-capacity magazines provided little comfort to men bleeding on the asphalt while their targets steadily advanced. Paper theories collapsed. Administration officials continued prioritizing logistical uniformity over instant-stopping reliability. Special operations forces ignored the sweeping mandates. Operators fighting in urban zones knew that close-quarters survival required immediate threat elimination. Their defiance forced leadership to acknowledge reality, leading the Marine Corps to reissue the heavy caliber in 2012. Procurement officials valued NATO standardization, but the men breaking down doors valued returning home alive. In 2017, the Army officially closed the M9 era by adopting the 9mm Sig Sauer M17. How did bureaucrats determine stopping power? In 1904, the Thomson-Lagarde Commission fired into suspended cadavers. They measured impact energy on dead flesh in quiet rooms. On July 7, 1944, living Marines prepared to face the enemy in night combat. While modern generals signed contracts for 9mm sidearms in 2017, Special Forces operators trusted the heavy cartridge verified on Saipan. Private First Class Harold Agerholm fought in that pitch-black chaos. 2nd Marine Division. He was 19. Agerholm spotted an abandoned Jeep ambulance near the front line. He sprinted through the open dirt. He located wounded Marines pinned down by enemy fire. He dragged them onto the flatbed. Mortar shells detonated nearby. Jagged steel shrapnel slammed loudly against the Jeep's metal siding. Agerholm ignored the noise. He drove the loaded vehicle across the swept zone to safety. Then he turned the wheel. He crossed the kill zone again. He made trip after trip through heavy rifle fire. He maintained this desperate pace for 3 straight hours. He pulled 45 casualties from the shattered line. The men writing procurement memos never faced a Banzai charge. They never needed to discover if 7 rounds could halt a mass infantry assault. Bureaucrats evaluated weapons on quiet test ranges. The men on Saipan tested them against 3,000 charging attackers. They proved the stopping power with their own lives. The Defense Department spent the following decades forgetting this hard-earned reality. A Japanese sniper bullet ended Agerholm's life before the fighting ceased. The military awarded the Medal of Honor to Harold Agerholm posthumously, decorating a hero who was only 19 years old. Harold Agerholm died in 1944 gripping a heavy pistol, and 80 years later, American Special Forces operators still choose to take that exact caliber into battle.